All right, another video on the dangers of adjacent corners, meeting corner starters with adjacent corners. This is one of the only games from a tournament we have records of. It's the only one I could find. And it happens to be one I played, though I didn't actually write it up, thanks to Vid for putting it in an article. But this is from the Rufus Finals. It was a tournament in 2011. I was up, played MC in the finals. And I think we played an interesting game that speaks of the danger of adjacent corners and how they can seem very powerful, but often are a lot riskier than they first appear. So it was a weird rule set. Lalakoffin made very strange rule sets. Kind of fun. I did well with them. But the first letter of each card in your hand must spell out Rufus. So you'll notice we both picked Ultima Weapon for our U. He picked Reno as his R, Flame Eater as his F, Ultima for his U. A lot of cards are named Ultima something, and Squall for his S. Well, I picked Robo, Fury, Unicorn, and Sergeant Joe because I thought Sergeant Joe looked funny. So, standard rules, same wall plus wall combo. There was also the rule that you could only have one card per level, so you could only have one level 10, one level 9. You could throw a level 2 in there, but we both went 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, as is, the standard thing to do given such stipulations. Very weird rule set. It is, as I said, the only tournament game I have a record of. I never kept any records of my games, which I kind of regret now because they'd be really fun to look back at. So I started with a weak corner. Mostly, I think this was to get my lowest level card out of my hand. In a way I knew I could recapture if needed. I tended to play these multi-level rule sets, looking to play the low levels early. I think there are viable ways to start with your high levels, but there's a lot more risk to it. And MC here went for the adjacent corner play. So this fits the kind of standard things we think we should look for. He can plus wall from 6. So if I take in 2, he can recapture. I can't take from 6, so he doesn't really need a way to recapture from 2. It seems like a pretty good reply. Because it's a card that's very hard for me to take, and it is relatively easy for him to take back. Now you might think this uses one of the higher level cards in his hand. It uses a level 8, but he still has his 2 most powerful. He's also on second turn, so we'll only have to play 4 of his cards. So he's still gonna, he's not using up a ton of power early that he won't use up quickly anyway. Well, first turn has to be a little more careful about the order they play their cards because they're going to end up having to play all of them and don't want to be stuck with a very weak card at the end. Second turn can be a little more free about it. So I think this just looks like a good reply, and I don't have great memories of this game or this match, but my recollection is I was worried here, that I was somewhat uncomfortable in this position, but eventually found a move I was happy with. And we should know by now, what the critical line is going to be, right? The critical line is going to be I block the in-between square, and there's the question of, does he have favorable Ls? And if he doesn't, I will be in great shape, and if he does, I will be in significant trouble. So I blocked the in-between square. I played Sergeant Joe in 2 with a 9 down, something difficult for him to take. And there's the question of which L to go for. So MC's move here received criticism at the time. Vid in his article called it a special move with scare quotes around it. But actually, this position is already lost for red. And the move in 3, I think, looks promising, looks totally reasonable, but it actually loses on the spot. And I think this is actually both a well-played game and a nice game to have the record of, but also an example of how games between top players were won, because players weren't making mistakes with 4 or 5 moves to go. You can brute force calculate that out, and you can also, if you have a good intuition, maybe don't even have to brute force that much out. And often that extended earlier, that players were playing perfect from the 3rd or 4th move on. And so where you really saw mistakes was in the first couple moves, either going into structures where it would be very hard to find good follow-ups, and even if there was an escape, they wouldn't find it, or playing very normal, good, strong, smart-looking moves that happen not to actually work for quite complicated reasons. And so it turns out the move in 3 lost on the spot, and I ended up playing a, I think, very nice game to take the win. But I also played a game that followed every pattern we've talked about, right? It just followed the main line. They played an adjacent corner. I blocked the in-between square. They then play to set up an L formation, and I either block 5 if I have to, or if I can find a way to not have to block 5, I then play in the nearby corner, making sure they don't have 5, and after that, they're in a lot of trouble. So MC went for 8, 7, 3, 4, and 4. This was the move described in unflattering terms. It does set up a card for 5, sort of. Squall goes there, but Squall goes there while overpowering, which means it's a move that can be set up against because it can be comboed back. And the question is, does blue need to block, or can I indirectly control 5 and stop Squall from going there? And I think once we ask that question, it's instantly apparent what the move should be. And the correct move is 8, 5, 8, 5, and 7. Because Squall now can't go in 5 without immediately being comboed back, and it's quickly apparent this position is a complete disaster, because if the L setting up player cannot go in 5, it's awful. And so I think this was a good move. Not the hardest move to find when you understand the position, but the key move to understanding this position is knowing I don't want to go in 5 if I don't have to. Can I set up anything controlling it? In this case, I could. And so this move was going to be very strong, and red would have to be very lucky to hold a tie here. MC checked all the standard moves, didn't find any saves there, tried something weird with 4, 9, A4, and 9. I think this is a very respectable thing to do. Try to set up something somewhere and throw them off. But it was pretty straightforward win. I played Robo in 6, he played Squall in 5, and I ended the game with Ultima Weapon in 8 and win 6-4. But there are other Ls, and I think the reason Vid identified the move in 4 as weird is that the L in 6 looks a lot more natural, right? There's a few reasons for this. One is it does set up more in 5. The other one only had overpowering to follow in 5. This one has an actual plus in 5. Another is the remaining directionality of the cards in MC's hand seems a little better. Another is this card is less vulnerable to being comboed back, of course, because it took by plus wall, not by overpowering. I suspect in the game when we played it, though I don't remember, that this was the move I was expecting, because it seemed the logical move in the position. What I suspect happened is that MC looked at this move and saw the key line here and thought it was dangerous and started looking for other alternatives. Because, as I said, the move in 3 was actually the losing move, not the follow-up in 4. And against the follow-up in 4, I only had one winning move, the move I found in 7 with Unicorn. And against this, I think there's also only one winning move. And so, while the initial move was losing by force, it still requires a lot of precision to prove. So, okay, what's the question? Well, we know the question, right? It's, does blue have to block 5? And if they don't, they should probably go in 9. And unsurprisingly here, the move is in 9. And if we look at what red wants to play in 5, it's 4, 9, A4. And blue already has that somewhat under control with either 8, 5, 8, 5 or 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 4. That can be plus walled back in 8. So 5, I have some control of 2, and I can just go in 9. And after Robo in 9, this position is just winning. It looks a bit silly because it can be plus walled, but that's not so scary. The really important thing is to control 5. So if they play in 5, they lose to either of my cards in 8. If they play 7, 7, 7, 4 in 5, that gets plus, not plus walled by 8, 5, 8, 5, and 8. If they go 8, 4, 6, 9 in 5, they just can't recapture it at all, and I can just take it from below. And if they go 7, 7, 7, 4 in 8, I can go 8, 5, 8, 5, and 5. And I capture enough, and they don't really have good ways to recapture because my 7, 7, 7, 4 dominates their 4, 9, A4 at the end. And so this L did not work either. So my summary of this is, I think I played well. I think I played a good game, but it was entirely following the standard schema, right? When they play the adjacent corner, I blocked the middle square. Then, when they set up the L, I checked, do they have a way in 5, move in 5, and can I control their move in 5? If I can, I want to then go in the nearby corner, which I did. I played a fairly weak out-facing value, but the important thing was a controlled 5. Controlling 5 is just the most important thing here. Also, I'm pretty glad that I played a weak corner starter and won this game. It's a favorite starter type of mine, and I'm always happy to celebrate it, and I didn't know I'd actually won huge tournament games with it. But this was a nice one to win with such a move. I often call Seto the champion of the weak corner, but I think I championed it well as well. And here, a very good-looking adjacent corner, something where he had better cards for the in-between square, better cards to recapture his starter, or recapture his corner, could already take my starter from both sides, so we didn't have the problem we saw in the last video, where couldn't take the starter from either side, and just always had that problem that the starter was going to be safe the whole way down the road. But I think adjacent corners are just a lot riskier than both myself and others often give them credit for, because you really have to win the fight for 5, and the fight for 5 is enough moves away that it's really hard to keep that understanding in mind while picking out an adjacent corner. And so I think they're a difficult thing. An adjacent corner move has to be accomplishing a lot of things, especially with combo on and especially in open, to be a viable and strong move type. And I think it's no surprise that adjacent corners are this kind of counter-attacking type of play that will see both more wins and more losses than other move types. So when to look for this kind of L, I think it's when we're delighted with one way of taking their starter, but we have trouble with the other, and we want to build against that side. And I think it's often the best way to do that. I also think weak corner adjacent corners may be underrated. A lot of people go to strong corner adjacents, but we can play in an adjacent corner and play weakly, and I think that can be pretty viable as well. And, you can't see the whole slide here, but actually, does the slide just not exist? I'm very confused. Okay, I don't know. So I guess what I was probably closing on is, is much like capturing starters, playing an adjacent corner has many uses, but it is not something to rely upon as here is how I always meet a corner starter. You know, I looked at 25 examples at the end with adjacent corners, and about a fifth of with capturing starters, and about a fifth of them I thought capturing the opponent's corner starter when they played a strong corner was a reasonable or good or the best way to go. It was about a fifth of the time, 20-ish%. Maybe a tad under, but somewhere around there. And I would think that adjacent corners are a good reply, like logical, sensible adjacent corners are a good reply a bit more frequently than that, maybe something like 33%, but that some players are likely playing them at too high a rate, because I think they're a very appealing type of move. I always really liked them, but if you don't have the L, you're in a lot of trouble. And I hope both this and the last video make that really clear, that it's all about having a good L. And Ls are inherently nice because you have the secure card and they don't. But, I mean, these secured Ls are inherently nice. But that doesn't mean second turn has already succeeded. And often they can be lost or in trouble after very natural looking moves.